Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. And first, let me say it's an honor to be here. I'm a relative newcomer to mindfulness, so I just want you to keep that in your mind that I don't consider myself a mindfulness scholar. In fact, my career has been spent trying to bring parties together in international conflicts, bring them together for dialogues, and to see if we can't bring some, progress toward creating peace in these societies. I'm not going to focus on that today, but there's one important thing that I should tell you that came out of all of that work over the years, and that is understanding the importance of dignity to all of us who consider ourselves human beings. And I just want to share my screen here. Okay, great. So, I wanted to just give you a little short story about how I arrived at this understanding of the importance of dignity in all of our lives. And as I said, I was sitting there facilitating these dialogues, countless dialogues over the years in the Middle East, in Asia, and near you actually in Sri Lanka. I spent a whole decade working on that conflict in Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Northern Ireland, Libya, Syria. So I have no shortage of experience working in all these conflicts, but the most important thing that I learned from sitting at those tables is that, when we try to negotiate, it's all about the political issues that divide them. And I saw at the same time, when we're trying to come up with solutions to these political issues, that there was a human element underlying all of this intractable conflict. And that human element was dignity, and how people react so profoundly, so strongly, when they feel like they're not even treated like human beings. So it was like an epiphany for me. Whoa, this is what we need to be talking about at these tables. Ways in which our dignity is not insulted. And so, very long story short, I introduced this topic of dignity to some people. I think the first time I did this was in Sri Lanka, and asked people to talk about times when they felt their dignity had been violated by the conflict. And you would not believe how that opened doors, how everybody had a story about the way, not only them personally, how they were treated with indignity, but how their ancestors, their families, and so this became a turning point for me. And I wrote about this. I decided I've got to write about this. I feel like I've uncovered a missing link in our understanding of conflict. It's about dignity, and we have to elevate that idea and see if we can't have a discussion about it. And so, in my field in Alpha Revolution, we always talk about trying to find common ground in order to solve these problems. I said, Papa, it's not common ground. We have to find higher ground. Because this aspiration to be treated with dignity is one of our fundamental human desires. We all want this, no matter what part of the world or universe we come from. I may agree the aliens want to be treated with dignity. But honestly, I think the idea that
all this is teaching, but
our humanity really depends on the extent to which we understand this profound human issue. And I love this quote by John Nesbitt. He says, the most exciting breakthroughs of the 21st century will not occur because of technology, but because of an expanding concept of what it means to be human. And I can tell you this concept of wanting to be treated with dignity is fundamental. It's a core truth. And let me just say another truth about what it means to be human. Really simple. Number one, that we all want to be treated as if we matter. We all want to be treated with dignity. Second truth, when we're not treated with dignity, we suffer. Third truth, when we are treated with dignity, we flourish. We humans, no matter where on the planet we're from, we all want to be seen, to be heard, to be acknowledged, to be understood. This is what our shared humanity is about. This is about what it means to be human. And I'm going to take you through my, all the research that I've done on this. In the beginning, I thought, whoa, this dignity stuff is so important to these conflicts. I said to myself, we've got to make it practical. How are we going to make this this understanding of this concept, a conflict resolution methodology? How can we do that? So I decided, number one, I had to write this book. The first book was Dignity, Its Essential Role in Resolving Conflict. Once that came out, I thought I was writing this book for my conflict resolution community. But when the book came out, much to my surprise, it touched a nerve in the corporate world, in healthcare, in education, in faith communities, organizations of all kinds. And people would write to me and say, oh my gosh, I think you illuminated a problem that we're having. I say in the corporate world, I got these emails from people saying, I think a lot of our conflicts in the workplace are rooted in dignity, because we have so many toxic elements in our culture that we need your insights about dignity and how to create a culture of dignity. So this was just astonishing to me that this touched a nerve at all these other arenas. So I'm going to walk you through the basic building blocks. But before I do that, I want to tell you that once I did go into the corporate world, especially the corporate world, and saw all the toxicity in the corporate world, in those cultures, how people were feeling like they were treated badly, like it didn't even matter, they were a means to an end. And so I realized, oh my gosh, I think what I have to do now is write a book about leadership and dignity, because if the leadership of organizations doesn't understand this profound human concept of dignity and how people want to be treated, they want to be considered, seen as if they matter to the organization. So without the leadership having consciousness on what dignity is about, I'm going to leave this to mindfulness in a minute, just so you know. But without leadership knowing this, we're going to have cultures that continue to be dysfunctional. So that's why I wrote the second book, Leading with Dignity, How to Create a Culture That Brings Out the Best in People. All right, so let me just go through this. First of all, what am I talking about? What is dignity? And let me say, I had to really simplify this definition, because when I went into the literature, especially the philosophy literature and the theology literature, it was so esoteric, the back and forth, and what it is, what it isn't. I can remember, I wanted a practical way of using this concept of dignity to help end human suffering. That was my goal. Not only to end human suffering, makes me so sad when I think of all the suffering I've seen in the world, but to also heal people. How do you heal from being mistreated? How do you begin to even flourish? We talked about flourishing, and the previous speaker talked about flourishing. How do we do that if we don't have a strong sense of our dignity? So anyway, my definition is really simple. Our dignity is our inherent value and worth, and our inherent vulnerability. Now, what does that mean? Our inherent value, we were born with dignity. We were born with an essential sense of worth. We were born worthy. And equally as important to understand that from a human perspective, we were also born vulnerable to having that dignity assaulted, to being in pain and suffering as a result of having that dignity assaulted. So that vulnerability is something that we have to have at the forefront of our consciousness, that all humans can suffer if we don't treat them well. And it becomes our choice. How do we do this? How do we make dignity a way of life? Okay, so every time I give a talk in person, and let me just say, I wish I were there with you. I want to come back another time because India, I've been to Sri Lanka so many times, but India has always been on my list of places to visit. So next time I'm going to come in person. But anyway, when I do an in-person event, I always ask people, what do you think dignity is? And 9 times out of 10, the first response is respect. Dignity is respect. And I really feel like it's different for respect. And let me just explain why. So dignity is part of our birthright. We are born with it, all right? We deserve to be treated with dignity no matter what. We don't have to do anything because we are already embodied dignity. And respect, on the other hand, I think when I say I respect somebody, it means like I really admire that person. Oh my goodness, that person is a human being, and especially because that person has done something important to deserve my respect. Whereas dignity, you know what, even if we behave badly, we still deserve to be treated with dignity. And my parties and my conflicts would say to me, we demand respect. We demand respect in these conflict resolution dialogues. And they'd say, hey, look, you can't demand respect. What you can demand is to be treated with dignity. That is a way out of these conflicts. That's something we can do something about if we educate ourselves about what dignity is and how we can use it to help heal the wounds of these broken relationships and move forward into flourishing. So I think it's different from respect. And if for some reason you have a question about whether we were born worthy and born with value and vulnerability, take a look at these little precious ones. You know, when they come into our lives, oh my goodness, not only do we just, believe in their value and in their worth, but I think we would go farther and we would even say that these little ones are invaluable, priceless, irreplaceable. So what do we do with something that's invaluable, priceless, and irreplaceable? We protect it, we nurture it, we care for it. And we're really good at caring for these babies' physical needs, but I have to say out loud here that these babies, their dignity needs, their need to be seen as something of value and experience that value in their lifetime is equally important as taking care of their physical needs. So we have to project these little ones. And they bring out the best in us, these precious beings. And I also want to remind you that it's easy to see their preciousness in these photographs and when they are little infants. And unfortunately, as we grow and develop into bigger human beings, adults, we tend to lose that preciousness. But my goal is to get us back to seeing each other as these precious, invaluable, priceless, and irreplaceable human beings. Because I'm an academic, as well as a practitioner, I decided that I have to find some evidence, some hard evidence that this issue of dignity that I believe to the absolute core of my being is an essential knowledge and consciousness that we have to have as human beings in order for our species to survive, in order for humanity to survive, we have to have this knowledge. And so somebody told me about this amazing research in neuroscience. There are people who are studying social and social and emotional neuroscience. And what these people that I discovered out in California, Matt Lederman and Naomi Eisenberg, what they decided they wanted to do as neuroscientists was find out what parts of the brain get activated under certain social situations. So what they first wanted to do a kind of a baseline, and what they do is they put these subjects in these long tubes, like an MRI. It's called functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, and they had a screen above them as they were lying flat in this tube, this grain scan, and they would flash these different social scenes of what's happening between people. And they had a scene where someone broke his arm. You know, people were together and somebody, let's say, fell and broke his arm. And what they discovered here was that the ancient part of the brain, the part where you experience pain and suffering and all the emotions, you know about the fight and flight instinct, you've heard of all that, fight, flight, and freeze. Well, what they discovered was that this old part of the brain called the limbic system, and in particular the amygdala, gets triggered, gets lit up when somebody experiences a physical injury. Okay, that's not so surprising, but what is surprising is that when they flash scenarios of people having their dignity violated, guess what happened? The same area of the brain was lit up as if the people were experiencing a physical injury. That pain, that deep pain. Yeah, really. So when we have our dignity violated, when somebody mistreats us, we react as if we're having a physical injury. There's a physical reaction in our bodies, in our brains. And so, you know, I think this was a turning point for me when I discovered this, because when I went into the corporate world for the first time, I was meeting with the executive leadership team of this very powerful international corporation. And they said to me, well, Dr. Phipps, this dignity stuff, it's all very nice and touchy-feely. They use that expression. This is so nice and touchy-feely, but, you know, here in the corporate world, he said, we need evidence. And I said, oh, okay, you want some evidence that this dignity concern is actually real? Is that what you want? So I showed them this slide of the neuroscience literature. And by the way, this was in the early 2000s that I discovered this stuff. And from then until the present, it has been replicated over and over and over in much more sophisticated ways. So when I went in and I showed the team, the executive leadership team, this research, they said, okay, we get it. Can we talk about signing a contract? So this made a lot of sense to people, and they realized, well, these injuries to our dignity, these assaults to our dignity are like, so important. But yet, if you think about it, let's say what happens when we have something physical happens to us. We go in the hospital, we get a nice cast put on if it's a broken arm. But when we have our dignity violated, you know what? There's no 911 call. There's no emergency room we could go to. There's just nowhere. In fact, we're so embarrassed by dignity violations, we tend to just not bury them. We tend to stockpile them inside. And then lo and behold, one day somebody re-injures that dignity and we can blow up. So this is an absolutely critical piece, this research, this neuroscience research, because it says dignity does matter. And the other piece of research that I did around dignity was trying to figure out how to make it practical, I told you. Because when I talk about dignity, it still seems abstract to people. And what I realized is I had to go and interview people and ask them, how would you want to be treated if you were treated with dignity? And I was all over the map, all over the planet asking these questions. Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Europe, and I gathered these answers to how do you want to be treated. And there were these remarkable patterns that kept emerging no matter where I was. And I was expecting to find cultural differences in these responses. Whereas, and I didn't. The context of their answers might have been slightly different depending on the culture, but the emotional reaction to having their dignity violated or dignity honored is the same. So what are those 10 ways? I call them the 10 elements of dignity. Wait a minute, unfortunately. So the first of all, people want their identity accepted, no matter who they are, no matter their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, their physical capabilities. People want to be seen as equal in dignity, as human beings. They want recognition for their unique qualities and ways of life. And in the workplace, what this looks like is they want recognition for a job well done. You know, if somebody really works hard and does a great job on a project, they want their leaders to say to them, hey, well done, nice, thank you for your contribution. They want acknowledgement. And this is a really important one because I learned this from Archbishop Desmond Tutu when I worked with him. I had the pleasure and the honor to work with him for a decade, imagine that, and I learned so much. I said to him once, I said, look, you're like a champion of healing and reconciliation. What does it take for people to put the past to rest and be able to move on in their lives and heal? And he said, well, he's the most important thing. People need acknowledgement of suffering that they've endured. People need to hear what happened to you was wrong and it should have never happened to you. This acknowledgement is the first step toward healing. First step. Somebody sees you and says to you, what happened to you was wrong. Inclusion. Well, we've all done, diversity, equity, and inclusion, workshops and so forth. And so inclusion, everybody wants a sense of belonging. They want to feel connected to the organization, to the community, whatever. Safety, probably, you would understand that this isn't just physical safety, because that is important. But they want psychological safety. They want to feel safe in their environment. Fairness, okay, people want to be, fairness. Fairness is independence. People don't like to be micromanaged. Understanding. This is another critical one because people don't like to be judged. We hate that feeling of being judged. We'd rather be understood, that people take the time instead of judging us. Because we're so quick, we humans, to judge each other. We really desire for people to come to us and say, tell me more about your life. How did you arrive at this conclusion about how you feel? Benefit of the doubt. People want to be thought of as having integrity. And accountability, that's the key one, and responsibility for the harm. People want the perpetrator of a dignity violation to take responsibility for the harm they've created. So these 10 elements of dignity are what I call guidelines to good relationships. If you're in a leadership role in your organization and you really want to make a connection with your people, this is how you do it. This is the easy, simple formula. And the other thing people say to me, oh, Donna, this is just common sense, that this is how people want to be treated. And I say, yeah, it's common sense, but it's not common knowledge, and it's not common practice. So this is our leadership challenge here, is how do we do this? How do we get people to, how do we get our leaders and each other to treat us with each other with dignity, and as if we matter. So, I think that these are like the rules of engagement. This is the way we want to be treated. This is the way we want to treat other people. And here's the thing, when people feel like they're, especially in the workplace, there's all sorts of research on this, when people feel that they are being treated like this, several things happen. Productivity increases. Loyalty to the company increases. Willingness to give discretionary energy increases. Job retention increases. And last but not least, profits increase. So this, from a leadership perspective, this is like a no-brainer. We've got to figure this out because this is the road to human flourishing and human well-being. And so I think it's important to keep in mind that this stuff has to be learned. I meet with all kinds of leaders and who are wonderful, good, decent human beings, but they just haven't learned about dignity. There's nowhere in their MBA training that they learn how to do this, how to be in relationships. And I have to say now, we've made some big advances in the business management field. And I'm sure many of you know the work of Michael Pearson, the Humanistic Management Network. So we've made some huge advantages, but in the past, good people with good intentions were violating dignity without knowing it. So what does it take What does it take to have what I call dignity consciousness? It requires three things. And this is where I'm going to make the connection to mindfulness as well. The three things that dignity consciousness, if you want to say to yourself, I am a dignity aware, dignity conscious person, it requires, number one, a connection to your own dignity. Number two and three is a connection to the dignity of others, and the connection of the dignity beyond something, to the dignity of something beyond the self. I call these the three C's, and when, the first one sounds so simple. We have to embrace our own dignity. We have to embrace our inborn value and worth, and our inborn vulnerability. Well, that's one thing to say, but how do we believe that? How do we accept that we do have this inborn value and worth? It's one thing for me to just do a presentation and say to you, okay, all of you have inborn value and worth, and that's it. No, this is where I think mindfulness comes into the picture. Because I have found in my own experience of trying to get into that deep sense of value and worth, that mindfulness is the quickest route to take us there. When we can meditate on and be mindful of that deep sense of humanity that we all have, that deep sense of value, that in fact our lives are a miracle. That's where I've gotten to lately. It's an absolute miracle that we're here. And it's an absolute miracle that we're here in connection to other people, and that we see that dignity in other people as well. Because if I've got it, you've got it. And finally, the dignity to the connection to the dignity of something bigger, that's the planet, that's the environment, that's that's society. If we are in alignment with these three connections, I think this is what a fulfilled life looks like. And my students, when they talk about this third connection, they say, I want to live a life of meaning and purpose. We want that. And so I say, okay, you want a life of meaning and purpose, then you have to figure out what that is for you. What is that for you? What kind of job would make that happen for you? And getting into a mindful place and trying to get into that deep sense of what you're here for, why we're on this planet. And I think all of us at this juncture, we're put on this planet to heal the wounds of all of the indignities that we've all suffered up to this point, whether it's big world conflicts or whether it's conflicts that we have in our families, in our own internal conflict of not feeling worthy. There's an epidemic, let me tell you, of this first connection, epidemic of self-doubt out there. The first thing that I have to work on with people when I do dignity workshops is this connection to our own dignity. Once we get that deep sense of knowing from mindfulness meditation and other forms too, I'm not just, whatever, this is where we develop compassion.